to The Mill. I'm Rachel Ballatori, the founder and CEO of Mill & Co. With a very special guest today, someone I have known for a very, very, very long time, back to elementary school at this point, Zach?
I think
Zack
as
Ellis.
far as I can remember, yeah.
Long ass time. Zach's pronouns are he, him, and his, and he's the founder and CEO of TheirStory, which is an end-to-end oral history platform. Zach was a Division I wrestler at the University of Pennsylvania, where he earned his bachelor's in bioengineering. After college, Zach spent 6 years in Silicon Valley, working in industries ranging from API management to home healthcare and math education technology. As the grandson of a Holocaust survivor, he founded TheirStory in 2018 as a means of sharing and preserving family stories. Since then, however, TheirStory has evolved into a platform used by over 70 institutions, including Cornell University, the National Library Board of Singapore, and the Council of American Jewish Museums to collect, preserve, and share the stories of their community members now and for generations to come. Zach, thanks so much for joining.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Rachel.
Yeah, of course. So let's start with, I know I've given a decent synopsis of TheirStory, but I love the reason that you started this company, and I'd love for you to share that story with everyone.
Totally. So yeah, I started TheirStory, as you mentioned, as the grandson of a Holocaust survivor, but it really wasn't, it was in the background for me for a bit. One of the most powerful experience of my life was actually meeting the descendants of the German Catholic widow with 5 children who in the 1930s stood in front of her house in the small town of Hockenberg, Germany, while a mob of Nazi sympathizers were yelling "Juden raus," all the Jews out, while my grandfather hid inside of her house. And she stood up to the mob. They disbanded, and it's likely because of her courage that I'm here today. And so that had been in the background for a while in my life, but I hadn't really taken action on any of this until one day I was in Amsterdam in the Anne Frank house in the attic on a trip. This was back around 2014 when I was working in Silicon Valley. And in the attic, there was this clip playing on loop of Anne's father, Otto, where he basically concluded that because he had such a close relationship with Anne, but never really knew who she was until after she had died and he read her diary, that he believed most parents don't know really their children. Mm. And so it hit me, well, if most parents don't know their kids, then how could I know who my parents are? And so I started a project over the next 2 years, recording my parents telling their life stories from across the country. I was in San Francisco, and they were in Rochester, New York, where we grew up. And this was before Zoom or really any of that video sort of technology. And so about every other month, we'd hop on a FaceTime call. I'd record that using QuickTime on my laptop, and eventually learned just enough web development over about 6 months to build like the first prototype of this platform to record, to host these stories, and to have those accessible for our family for generations. And I realized kind of through this process that, one, it was really valuable to have these in a safe space owned by us, accessible in perpetuity, but just as important was the value of engaging in self-reflection and these open dialogues with my parents, and how it deepened our relationship and improved our capacity for better communication. That was kind of like the aha light bulb moment that there's something here, and thus the genesis of TheirStory.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing. I love hearing that. I've heard it many times now. And, as a child of a parent who passed from cancer at 54, which is way too young to lose a parent, I realized that I heard more stories about him after he passed than when he was alive. Yeah. And those stories now come from his siblings and his cousins and some of my older cousins that had just, no more time with him because they're just older than me. And so I think it's so powerful what you're doing, and not just for families, but also for businesses. And that kind of leads me to my next question is, we have a lot of people that start businesses and entrepreneurs and aspiring entrepreneurs that listen into our podcast. I'd love for you to share what it was like to go from this aha moment to starting the business, and talk me through some of the evolution that you've made today.
Yeah, sure. So it was a little bit of like a little bit at a time and then all at once. And so, I mean, the early stages was, back to what I was sharing before, which was just starting by building something for my own family. Just, this is my dad's biggest regret that he never recorded his dad's story. So this was almost like a gift of sorts to my dad. And so it started there. And then I'd say the big change, there were a couple things. So one was that when I learned, um, web development in the early days, it was not to become like the technical founder of TheirStory, or even to become a professional software engineer. Like I wanted to take the prototype, show it to someone who's technical, and for them to say, I believe in you, I believe in the idea, you suck at coding, you need me. And that's how I'd find like, my CTO. And that didn't happen. But what did happen was, I showed the prototype to a friend and former colleague who was like, I believe in you. I believe in the idea. You suck at coding. So do I. Here's $30,000. Go hire someone who knows what they're doing. And so that was kind of the first big milestone, was kind of the belief that you're building that prototype, and my friend really putting the money behind building the first usable part of the system. So that was step one. And then once I came back to Rochester, it was kind of running parallel experiments. And this is a bit where the shift happened from focusing on families to businesses and to more like cohort-based sort of work. Was that I went to my old synagogue, Temple Sinai in Rochester, and ran two experiments with two different fifth grade families. So the first, I just told my story. I said, hey, who wants to pilot the platform for free? And 10 out of 15 parents raised their hand in this group of families and said that they all wanted to record their aging parent. And so I met with each of them, for coffee separately, showed them the platform, got them up and running, and 1 out of 10 of those families ever did a single recording. And the one that did a recording, I physically went to their house and facilitated the conversation.
Yeah.
In parallel to that was this second experiment with the other set of fifth grade families, where same sort of thing, told the story, all that good stuff, but I worked with the teacher for the fifth grade class, and they already had a unit around family history called Finding Your Roots, where students were creating family trees and all that sort of stuff. And with the teacher, we created kind of a set of activities over the course of the month where students reflected on meaningful moments in their own lives, came up with their own set of questions, then used the platform on their own to record those stories. And every single family participated. 75% did multiple recordings when they didn't have to. And it really, maybe I'll finish out the last 30 seconds of this kind of story, was that it contributed to the environment of this kind of collaborative learning type of opportunity, where I remember one moment in particular. We saw a recording where the student, the father asked the student a question, or sorry, I take that back. The student asked the father, what do you want to be when you were growing up? Is that what you're doing now? And the dad gave this really beautiful response, 4 minutes or so, and then that was it. And I wrote to him and I said, loved your son's question, loved your response. I wonder what would have happened if you had asked that question back to your son and what he was thinking about, what he wants to be, and so on. And the father wrote back to me a couple days later and said, thank you so much for the feedback. Next time we were, in a conversation, I reflected my son's question back to him, and it turned into this beautiful conversation. And I said, great, can I call on you and we all get together at the end and, share what you learned, and did that. And it was this opportunity for not only creating more meaning within that family, but across the families that were participating. So that was the moment when I decided, hey, I think it really makes sense to pivot from focusing on families where it's this nice to have to the more kind of business context. In this case, it was educational context, but where it is someone's job. It's baked into kind of what they have to do.
I'm certainly not going to take credit for this, Zach, because it's your business. But if you recall, years ago, you and I spoke, and I was breaking down who I thought your audience would be. And I did mention on some level, I think this is such an incredible value for families and parents. But boy, are there some institutions that would really benefit from this. I am certainly not taking credit for your incredible success. I think it's fantastic what you're doing. Again, as a personal consumer, I would have loved to do this with my dad. And now that's too late for me with him, but it doesn't mean it's too late for for everyone else in my family and for these people that are using your platform. So I think it's incredible. And I think for people watching, a few key themes popped out to me.
Sure.
First was you went to a friend to ask for help, whether that was in the form of feedback or financial. And they gave you both and support. And I think that a lot of us have apprehension around asking for help for whatever our reasons are. Either
Yeah.
we feel that we don't have people that can help, or we feel that we're becoming a burden. We have guilt around asking for money. They're going to say no, then they're going to say no. But if they say yes, like the one that said yes, where would you be today if that wasn't a yes? I know where you'd be. You'd still be just as successful running your own business, but there's some people that would take that first no and walk away. So I think for me, that is one major theme that I take away from your current success from where you started, is that you were willing to put yourself out there, ask for help and support, and you received it. I think the next really important thing is that while you knew that you had a really great idea, you knew that you needed to prove the concept in terms of who your actual target audience is going to be and what is the most value that this platform can provide. So again, a lot of early stage entrepreneurs, they're so committed to their original idea because it's their baby, right? It's their passion. It's what catapulted them into entrepreneurship in the beginning. But just because it was our initial thought doesn't mean that that baby is not eventually going to grow up and develop a personality, and their hair color might change and their eye color might change, right? And some walk sooner than others. So the second takeaway that I take from your story, Zack, is that we have to be really aware of what's happening with our business, our product, our service. And it's okay to evolve because your core values didn't change,
Right.
right? Your
Right.
approach changed slightly. And then that fed into, well, how does this product then better serve this target audience who's really going to reap the most value from what I'm providing?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And you know, and we've continued to evolve since that point, but it steered us in the right direction. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's so hard, right? Because when you're starting out, you're like, here's 50,000. I remember so vividly having this conversation with you. You had so many ideas, but they were all circling around these core values of preservation, sharing, community, connectivity.
Yes.
So when you have really solid core values, the rest kind of falls into place and it will evolve. But those values you have stayed true to since day one of you sharing this idea with me.
Yes. Yes. We are not a mobile analytics company. We've
Right.
yeah, we have very much stayed in terms of, you know, our mission is to create the tools, you know, the services, the curriculum to empower communities to take ownership over their own narrative, and we stay true to that, even if we kind of bob and weave a little bit in terms of what's the core audience and use case, but it is all around building empathy, building connection through authentic human stories and through dialogue, and so
Yeah.
that's what I've definitely tried to stay true to.
Of 100%. And you're already working with a pretty diverse set of communities who are using their story today. How do you ensure that that platform is accommodating to a wide range of cultural and in human backgrounds and storytelling styles?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think it just comes down to you just have to keep talking to the people that we serve and just try to understand as much as possible where they're coming from and empower them to make those decisions and adapt the platform to those. So some like specific examples to that. So one that I like to give is that you know, in interviewing, it's, you know, a common you know, best practice to really be asking follow-up questions and everything. And I remember going to the Chickaloon Native Village of the Ahtna tribe in South Central Alaska, who's been using the platform the last couple of years, and I used to really recommend to people because there's two ways to kind of record through our system. You can also upload existing material, but two ways to record. One is, you know, kind of like this, you know, where it'd be you know, two or more people on the call. Typically interview style. You can also record asynchronously where you can send a link to someone and you can create prompts so people can respond on their own time.
Mm.
And I would always discourage people if they're trying to get a long form kind of story from using the short form type of the asynchronous content, because you should be there. You should be the interviewer asking follow-up questions and everything. And then lo and behold, the head of the oral history program for Chickaloon Native Village came back and said, "Oh my goodness, like the asynchronous sort of use case has put our narrators, narrators is kind of like the oral history term for the person telling their story, has put our narrators at so much more ease where they can just sit down, and we do it at our community gatherings, and we have this space where they can be, amongst themselves and just talk. And that they've been able to get so much material that way. And I would have totally recommended, if they had brought that to me initially and said, like, don't do that. Just like interview them if you're going to do long form content. So that was one, just being flexible, not even just the tech itself, but also in terms of what you're recommending, best practices. So that's one. The other is actually comes down to like metadata, like a very academic type of thing, which is that I'll stick with the indigenous community as an example, which is that different stories may only be allowed to be told during certain seasons. And so making sure that in the metadata of the recording, as like a platform where other people come and access it, it says like when it can be told. It's also what's important is the provenance of the recording, not just in terms of who was the person that uploaded it to the system, but who are all the people that this recording has like gone through. And so being able to even track more deeply than what most systems would track. And so these are like very, very specific sorts of things, but things I would have never known if I didn't just ask about that community and how they want to share their stories. And those are just a couple examples.
Yeah, that is amazing. And those are such great examples. And I'm also curious, technology is ever evolving. I'm sure you are constantly evaluating how your software is functioning. And so as the use of digital media increases, as well as our ability with what we're able to do with technology, where do you see TheirStory going in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of where I see TheirStory going, I think ultimately staying true to our mission to essentially, spread empathy and help to amplify more and more voices, especially from historically marginalized communities, is important. So already today, we make sure that we are kind of ADA compliant, so making it easy for users, people who are blind or visually impaired, people who might be deaf, and so in the platform, or people who might not speak English as their first language. So in the platform, there's a number of things from all the kind of standard WCAG types of things, easy keyboard navigation, compatibility with screen readers, ability to create closed captions within the platform. And so all of that is definitely core, and actually really excited to continue to work with some of our existing customers, like George Mason, who is really strong on the accessibility front, to even continue to evolve the platform in that way. But ultimately, as we make sure that we can be inclusive of as many people as possible and communities as possible, is thinking about the educational use case and how can we help to bring oral history into more and more into the classroom. So both in terms of actually like project-based learning, so where students are building skills around interviewing, asking questions, storytelling, and learning about the history of the communities in which they live, work, and play, and debate. And that's both through their actual connection with people about whatever topics they're learning, but then also building and learning from the growing archive of material from the other professional organizations that we serve, or even from one student class to the next year after year. So I'm really excited about the educational case and kind of the intergenerational dialogue.
Yeah. Amazing. I also can't wait to see how this continues to evolve. And I feel like, especially where we are now as a society at large, being able to communicate with each other in a really clear way is really important. It's something that is a bit taken for granted these days. So I applaud what you're doing. And I want to shift gears and end with a few personal questions, if that's okay. So
Sure.
you've been an entrepreneur, a solopreneur for a few years now. What if you could summarize your learnings, things that you would say to younger Zack, advice, how to maybe do things differently, better, things to lean into, things to maybe avoid, what would that be?
Hmm. Well, I think the advice that my last CEO gave me when I was setting off on uh, on this journey was good advice, which was that prepare to be lonely. Uh,
I'm laughing because it's like, it was quite literally, not to interject your response, but we won like a really big contract recently. And I'm literally sitting here alone and I'm like, okay, yes,
High
did it.
five yourself. Yeah.
Most isolating and incredible journey. All right, please continue.
Yeah. No, no, but it's so true. I mean, he knew he had been through it. It is a really lonely endeavor, and that I mean that's to the point of what their story is about. It's about um, trying to combat isolations, social isolation, and knowing that you're not alone, and being able to hear from others, being able to learn from others, and being able to share your story. And so many people, when it comes to especially oral history, I mean, there's many different ways of sharing your story, but from oral history, people talk about like kind of the therapeutic element of it, and how much is kept inside. And so, yeah, so I think it's so important to, um, you know, surround oneself with people that you can share your wins with, that you can share really candidly what's not working well. And I'm definitely really grateful that that I've had a number of just incredible people supporting me along the way. Everything from the person I mentioned before, the first person to kind of put money behind the idea, to our advisory board, to other entrepreneurs. I've appreciated the conversations that we've had, here and there, and others locally. And so, yeah, I think just having that support network is incredibly important. Ultimately, and just carry on, because it's going to be hard even with the support network. So
Yeah, you also need a community
yeah,
as an entrepreneur. If
yeah,
you're comfortable, I'd love for you to share, and you don't have to give a ton of detail, but I'd love if you could talk about a really hard learning in your entrepreneurial journey,
sure,
hard lesson, how you overcame it, and how you moving forward avoid any similar pitfalls.
yeah. What's it? I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind is that I mean, my deepest insecurity from the start was why me? Like, uh, why would anyone like come and work with me as a CEO? Like what? And I think that was a big hurdle to overcome. I think I'm overcoming it. I think that's still there, but and the way to overcome it is just to do. And so my biggest concern was about attracting talent, was attracting other people, because there's no way I could do this alone. And the thing that I admired most about my last CEO at Desmos was so Eli. He had started at Desmos when he was, I think, in his late 20s or so, mid to late 20s, and somehow some way attracted some of the most unbelievable people to come work at Desmos and to stay at Desmos when they could have been working anywhere.
Mm,
Um, and I told him, you're the type of founder that I want to be someday. Like it was this combination of confidence and competence and humility
mm,
that gave space for these great people to come and just do great work and to feel empowered to do it.
mhm,
And so I think I questioned for a long time, like why I'd be able to recreate that, why people would see me as that type of CEO. But lo and behold, we have customers that believe in me and believe in the product and find value in the product. We have a incredible advisory board of the people that are the exact people that I would hope would believe in me and the idea and what we're doing. And one of our investors just quit his job of 16 years in corporate strategy, finance, and M&A to join as my business partner.
mhm.
And we'll be having our CTO, who I've been working on for 5 years to get to join TheirStory, is going to be joining shortly here as well. So,
Wow,
so
congratulations.
overcome it by just doing. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
What you've described, Zach, is a common term known as imposter syndrome.
yeah,
And one of the best things I did in 2023 was I hired a business coach. Maria Cass. I've referenced her a few times in different podcast episodes. Hi, Maria, if you're watching. I love you. Maria talks a lot about your inner coach.
Mm.
And your inner coach kind of sits, on your shoulder and guides you through whatever you're dealing with. And I remember Zach being, 27, 28 when I started Mill & Co. How old am I? And I remember going into meetings with prospective clients or going to events and having people straight up ask me, how old are you? And I
Mm.
remember thinking to myself and eventually saying in so many nicer words, because I really needed their business, does my age have anything to do with this partnership? Or is it, wow, you've got a great model here. You have a fantastic team behind you. And I believe in you to take a leap of faith, knowing that I didn't have a case study to my name, right? I had work I did at previous agencies.
Yeah.
Mill & Co had nothing, literally nothing. And I had to make my first sale ever on nothing.
Yeah.
And I did. And it was a huge deal for us. It was a $40,000 6-month partnership
Yeah.
to run paid and organic social media strategy for a national fitness brand.
Wow.
They took a leap of faith in me. But I remember the hurdles and all they did. Every time I heard weird amounts of feedback or people saying like, oh, well, good for you, honey. And I'm like, okay, well, would you say that's my male counterpart? Or are you just saying that to me because I'm female? Asking how old I was. All of that then was feeding this insecurity of I'm an imposter. Everyone
Mm.
around me knows that I am an imposter. It's just a matter of time that it all comes out.
Mm.
And that is can be such a paralyzing, crippling feeling. And how I personally work through it is I try really hard, and I am not perfect at it yet, but I try really hard to stay very aware of my feelings. So if I find that I'm getting really caught up in something, or I get an email from someone and it has notes of passive aggression in it, rather than immediately be like, oh my God, they're right, or just, yeah, of course, like I'm terrible at my job, I take a step back and I walk away,
Mm.
figuratively or literally. And I just think to myself, like, what does this have anything to do with my greater vision for my business? No, then I'm either going to call this person, have a conversation. Hey, this is how your email came off to me. Let's talk about it. Because at the end of the day, I don't care about this conversation. I care that this end goal is met. So for me, really staying aware and trying to actually remove some of the emotion from the decision making has been my best tool in overcoming imposter syndrome. So doing it, to your point, but also for me, it's really staying aware of my actions and feelings. And then what's
Mm.
been most important for me, and I think it's been one of the things that's really solidified me starting to feel like less of an imposter, is when I go through a scenario, for example, passive aggressive email, I call the individual, we have a conversation. I then force myself to reflect on that situation and say, wow, what a non-issue that was, right? Everything is fine. We're both happy. We're still going to meet our end deliverable. I did a really good job. This is the type of leader that I am. I lead with empathy and kindness, open communication, but I also have very strict boundaries against language I don't agree with, right?
Yeah.
So that whole kind of journey of being aware, stepping away, stripping the emotion, keeping the big picture in mind, and then reflecting on how it went has been an ongoing process for me as a leader, but it's something I really, really believe in.
Yeah. What I noticed about you were saying and what I admire is that, I mean, it seems like you really prioritize the relationship and being on the same page, and like you said, open communication. Even taking the initiative to respond to the email by having a call and not just replying via text, which is notoriously a great way to have miscommunication. Yeah, I mean, I really admire that behavior, because it regardless of age, there are so many people who might not take that step of saying like,
Mm,
"Hey, let's just have a call. Like, I care about the relationship, being on the same page. Let's talk about how I experienced this, give you a chance to say whatever you were thinking, and then move forward."
yep.
So I love, yeah, that's awesome.
It is hard because a lot of us even people that say, I love confrontation, which by the way, I don't know anyone that's openly like, I love a good fight. Like it makes all of us a little uncomfortable. Why? Because we don't want to have distaste for people. We don't want to feel like people have distaste for us. And so I try really hard to take, and it always makes me feel like I have the upper hand when I do this, by the way,
Mm,
calling you saying, hey, I got your email. This is how it made me feel. This is some things I was sensing. I just wanted to make sure you're all good. And I
mm,
start the conversation there, right? Because then people are immediately like on their heels, like, oh, I was expecting you to call me to the fight. And I'm like, I am not going to fight. We're going to
right.
get to a common ground, but we're
Yeah.
going to do it in a way where you know very clearly where my boundaries lie.
Yeah.
I'm going to make what I need very clear. And I may even learn, hey, you know what? I had a really rough day, or I just had a lot going on. You know what? I just kind of sent that email. I wasn't really thinking clearly. Hey, no worries. I totally understand that stuff happens. Here's what we're going to move forward from
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
I have experienced that when I do have those conversations with people, when that happens, it's unlikely that it happens again. And if it does, they catch themselves.
Right. Right.
And I am, call it soft parenting, call it being a good leader. And, in my way, that is how I am confrontational, is address it early, often, immediately,
Yeah.
with empathy, with kindness and understanding, but also with very firm, clear boundaries of, mm-mm,
Yeah.
this is where we need to go.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the lessons I've learned from my dad, who had used to do like assertiveness training and has a PhD in psych around rational behavior therapy, was that the way that he defines assertiveness is behaving in a way that respects the rights and wishes of both yourself and others simultaneously.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I see assertiveness, and to add to that, because I think assertiveness, at least in the way that I like to think about it, sometimes can get misconstrued as aggression. So if you're respecting only your own rights and wishes, that's aggressive behavior. If you're respecting only someone else's rights and wishes, then that's passive behavior. And
Mhm.
assertiveness is just clearly communicating and seeking to understand both sides. And it's, to me,
Yeah.
it's two sides of the same coin: assertiveness and empathy. And with, pure empathy is just understanding someone else's point of view, but assertiveness is what allows you both to move forward in an inclusive way, in a way that respects both people's rights and wishes. It's super important.
I mean, you need to have your dad on here for a conversation. I love that, and I wanna dig into that so hard. And
Yeah.
I heard this recently from someone. There's empathy, where I think she was a nurse, and she was like, "I used to go into my job with a ton of empathy." And what ended up happening is she was so drained when she left, because to her, empathy meant trying to so fully understand that you're almost embodying their emotions to help you understand, is how she was interpreting the word and the action of empathy.
Mm,
It started to have really bad effects on her at home, mentally, emotionally, physically. She was just like, it was so heavy on her. So she started doing some research and then came across the term compassion. So then she started approaching her patients with compassion, compassionate care, which is slightly different in the sense that you are still listening to them and hearing them. You're understanding them, but you are not taking it on your body. You're engaging with them in a way that makes them feel seen, heard, and understood, but protecting your own boundaries. And I just never heard it explained that way before, because I'm, a Mill and Co. One of our three core values is empathy. The
mm,
other two are kindness and open communication.
yeah.
But to hear compassion be described like that and used in that specific scenario of nurse to patient, I just thought was so fascinating, because I agree there's been times where I'm in recurring situations, maybe with contractors, where I'm providing a ton of empathy to the point that it's like I feel bad asking for things when
Mm,
I have every right to do so. So I think that's where empathy can have adverse reactions versus having compassion while still setting very clear boundaries and expectations.
yeah. Yeah. Can I ask you a question?
Of course.
I'm curious if if you remember, when you think back to like the conversations that you had where you first started to, you know, overcome that sort of imposter syndrome, and more clearly state boundaries or that sort of thing. I mean, what was like the earliest conversation you can remember where you kind of pushed yourself outside of that comfort zone and behaved in the way that you wanted to be? This is the Rachel I want to be. Do you remember what those like earliest conversations were? One of them?
I do. I actually remember the very first time I did it in the moment, and believe it or not, it was in 2023,
Mm,
over 5 years into business. I have always been very vocal. Since starting my business, I've gotten immediately started to work on getting over imposter syndrome and setting boundaries. So boundary setting, I have always been good at. Communicating those boundaries and holding other people accountable to be respectful of those boundaries has been a work in progress for me, but something I feel really good about. In 2023, I had a prospective client reach out to me. They wanted to set up a call to talk about our blueprint strategy. And I got on the call. It was a male and female owned company. Not that gender really has anything to do with this, but it may. And the male gentleman, after reaching out to me to set up the call, I went through the whole pitch. It was very like, listen, we're here if you need us. I believe in your business. Either way, I think you're on the right path. It was very like easy, passive conversation. He took a pause and said to me, so I looked you up on LinkedIn and I noticed that you don't have an MBA. So I'm just curious what makes you feel qualified to handle our business. And I was, me, it's very rare for me to be speechless. And I took a good like 4-second pause because I was just like, A, did you really just fucking ask me that? B, good for you for looking me up on LinkedIn. Thank you so much. And C, like, how do I even, my brain was going down 17 paths of like, yell, be angry, I'm so disrespected, be empathetic, right? I'm just like, and this is all happening in a 4-second window of me just being silent, staring, frankly, at myself on a Zoom call. And so I decided to take the approach in that 4-second window of silence of saying, you had reached out to us, which tells me that you did a little bit of homework. You also strike me as someone whose time is valuable and that you wouldn't do something that would waste your own time. And that went on. I've been in business for X many years. We've had 50 plus clients. We've doubled in revenue every year. Got, 2 full-time employees plus myself, whatever. We've done tons of great work that we're really proud of. In a way to kind of defend myself for sure, but also just like you asked, I'm delivering. And I ended it with, I decided that I would rather start working than put myself into further school and educational debt and just start getting real work experience, which I haven't regretted for a day in my life. He didn't really respond to any of that after I went through, maybe 60, 120 seconds of sharing that story. I got off the call and was so disgusted, frankly, that I think old Rachel would have, waited around or had them maybe reach back out to me or just kind of see what was happening and see how I was feeling after the fact. But I immediately drafted an email to the other co-founder and I let her know, I just want to let you know, I really appreciate your time. I think what the two of you are building is fantastic. I am no longer interested in pursuing this project with you, so I respectfully withdraw from your consideration, but I thank you so much. If you have any questions, please let me know. And that happened in 2023. So I think that the takeaway I got from that is I'm really proud of how I handled that response in the moment.
yeah.
I stayed very calm. I also did not back down and let someone disrespect me in that way. And then I didn't even give them the opportunity to say no.
Yeah.
I said, this is not this doesn't fit within the ethos of my company. If you are already acting this way to me in a proposal conversation you requested, I can't even imagine what it would be like once we're under contract.
Right.
So that's really like the first time I think I acted immediately on the spot and instantly reflected on it and was like, I wouldn't change a single thing that I just did about that. I'm so proud of myself.
Wow. Yeah, that's such a powerful story. Yeah.
Right? There's not much to say other than like, holy shit, did someone really ask you that? Yes, they did. So, but you know what? That happens, right? It's going to happen probably forever to all of us. I'm sure you've experienced things like that. You know, I think what's great is to continue to stay aware, be confident in what you've done. And for me, I look at all the great clients we do have who are so appreciative and thought provoking and want to do more, do better, really trust us. And I lean into that as fuel, right?
Yeah,
Rather than letting the pessimism of one person that is not a fit for us
right.
take me down.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the thing. Like you also are in control of who you work with and who you don't work with. And when those boundaries are crossed, that's
They're
it.
done.
Done. Yeah.
Don't cross an Italian woman, Zach.
Yeah.
You're out.
I'll try not to learn from experience on that one. I will just
Yeah.
stay away from crossing Italian
Yeah. Yeah.
women. Yeah. Yeah.
Good. Good man. Well, Zach, thank you so much. It has been a pleasure, as always, to chat with you. For those interested in learning more about Zach or their story, they will be tagged when we share this on LinkedIn. I highly encourage you to go explore them. If you feel it might be something right for your business or know someone that may be interested, please reach out to Zach or reach out to me, and I'd be happy to pass along his information. Zach, thank you so much.
Thank you, Rachel.
For everyone who tuned into the mill, thank you, and we'll see you next time.